All right, guys, so since we do not get to do our heart dissection in class this year, I thought I'd do a quick video of it and run through the major pieces. All right, so we're gonna first start with the external anatomy, then we'll talk about what's on the inside, we'll talk about the major blood vessels that attach up top here, and then we'll also review the path of the blood as well as how the heart beats. So it should work out pretty well for us, okay? Nice little review. All right, so in terms of external anatomy, the first thing that usually jumps out at people is this kind of diagonal line going right here. So this diagonal line is actually the line between the two ventricles, okay? So remember the heart, we call it right and left, but the heart kind of sits like this in a person's chest, okay? It points to the left. So remember, this is gonna be the left side because it's sitting in a person's chest, right? If somebody was standing in front of me, this would be their left and their right. Okay, so this is really gonna be the left ventricle on this side, and this is gonna be the right ventricle, and between these two is the coronary artery, the main coronary. And remember, the coronary artery is the blood vessel that feeds the muscle of the heart, okay? And as LDL, our bad cholesterol, flows through there, it deposits fat all along the blood vessel, okay? So it actually gets marked by a channel of fat more than anything else. You can see the fat, not really the blood vessel, okay? So if you got the coronary artery, then you got left ventricle, right ventricle. And then on the top, the part that is most striking to people are the atria. So the atria are not like big chambers. This is actually one of the atria right here. It's like this flat little balloon, kind of hard to kind of see there. On this side, this one's a little bit more distended, but this is the atria, okay? So when blood flows into them, what you'd actually see is something that looks a little bit more like this, okay? Where it will expand out. I'm kind of expanding this out with a wooden rod, okay? And then when the atria contract, they squeeze the blood down and in, so that flattens out, and then it would fill and flatten out. It's almost like a balloon inflating and then deflating over and over on the outside of the heart, okay? So the two atria, and one of the things that's also interesting is if you look at the front of the heart here, the atria are almost invisible because really they're kind of, we call them left and right, but they're really both kind of on the back. The back of the heart, if I flip this around for you, is actually going to be the busiest area. This is where all your veins are. The superior and inferior vena cava are in the back, the pulmonary veins are in the back, and the atria are really kind of more on the back side of the heart as well. All right, so that's the external anatomy. We got our two ventricles, our two atria, and the coronary artery gone. Let's open this up and look at the inside, okay? So on the inside, pieces that you should see, we have the two chambers, right? So this right here on this side, this opening here is gonna be the right ventricle, and here's the left ventricle on this side. And you'll notice that the difference in the thickness of the wall is pretty dramatic. So if I pull this closer here, notice how this is reasonably thin over here on this right ventricle, okay, versus this being much, much thicker over on this side, on the left ventricle. And that makes sense because remember, this side, the right side is only pumping the blood. When the ventricle contracts, it pumps the blood to the lungs. That's not a big distance to go. But this side is pumping the blood to the entire body. Okay, so there has to be more muscle here to squeeze this blood to my brain and my toes and every organ in my body coming right out of here. Okay, so this side, the left side, is much, much more muscular. Okay, the other thing you can see on the inside are the valves. So if I can angle this properly here, this right here is one of the valves. Okay, so it's on the left side. So this is the bicuspid valve. It's the valve between the left atrium, okay, coming down into the left ventricle here. So the blood would flow through just like the pointer is going right now, comes down through here, fills, then this whole area fills with blood. And then when the ventricle contracts, it's hard to do because I'm pulling it open, but this valve just folds over like this. So the blood would come up this way, slide along this edge, and go up and out the aorta, which we'll show you here in a second. But this will shoot right up out the surface and out the aorta in a second, all right? So in terms of the internal anatomy, you've got the two ventricles, you got one of the valves is visible here, right? The bicuspid valve. The tricuspid's kind of visible, but it's not nearly as good. And then right here, the wall in between the two is referred to as the septum, the intraventricular, between the two ventricles, septum. Okay, so we got the intraventricular septum here in the middle. And it's made out of muscle. It helps in the contraction as well. That's also how the electrical wave gets down, right? So remember, the atria contract and then the wave comes down the septum. So the electrical wave comes down here till it reaches the apex, the point, and then it spreads to the ventricles and the ventricles start to contract. So that's where we've talked about the septum. All right. In terms of the blood vessels are most easily seen if we kind of look at it from the top here. So I'm going to kind of angle it this way. And from the top, what you'll see is you'll see an opening right here, kind of hides because it gets squished flat. Okay, and this is going to be the pulmonary artery. And I know this is the pulmonary artery because if I go here and I check back into this, where does this wooden dowel come out? It comes out into our right ventricle. Okay, and remember the right ventricle is going to squeeze the blood up and out the pulmonary artery. So that's where this would be going. This would be blood coming from the ventricle here, okay, from the right ventricle coming up and out the pulmonary artery and going out to the body, okay. In our diagram that we've been using, okay, you can see that here with the right ventricle up and out the pulmonary artery and out to the lungs, okay. Let's go back to this. All right. The other main blood vessel that I usually do in our lab is the aorta, and there's actually multiple branches here. This is all going to be, sorry, the angle's off a little bit. This is all going to be aorta here. Okay, so this is all aorta, and we know that because if I push this down through, based on our big diagram, right? So I'm going this way, aorta down and through. It should take me into the left ventricle. So let's find out. A little bit of wiggling. Push this down in here. And there is the rod coming out right into that left ventricle. Okay, so the blood would go right up there. Okay. Now on the back, we usually can't do the pulmonary veins and the vena cavas very well. But if this is the right side, we should have a superior vena cava, which would be coming in here, which is this one for sure. And then, right, because it's going into that atrium. And then sometimes we get to see the inferior vena cava, but usually it's kind of cut off and doesn't work very well. Let's check this and let's see if this might be it here. Yeah, this is going the other side. So on this side, we've got the pulmonary veins. I apologize, I know that was brutal there. Can't really show you very well what we're seeing. But this is gonna be the big opening for the pulmonary veins. So when they dissect, when they remove these hearts for dissection for us, they don't really take the time to save the pulmonary veins or the vena cavas very well. So this big opening here would actually be 4 separate veins would have attached right here and gone in here. So the blood coming back from the lungs goes into this right here, would come into the back of the heart, into the left atrium, down through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle and out to the body from there. All right, so let's take a second to review the pathway of the blood and how the blood flows through the body, okay? So let's start with the superior vena cava. So let's say the blood's coming back from your brain, right? So if the blood's coming back from your brain, it will come in through this blood vessel right here, right on the top of the heart, okay? Into this right atrium, okay? Right atrium, when that contracts, is gonna squeeze the blood down through the tricuspid valve, which we're coming through right here. So this is going to be blood. We're kind of simulating it with this wooden dowel coming through that tricuspid valve. You can see the valve here, like the little parachute on this side here, okay, and here, coming through, filling the ventricle, okay, and then when that ventricle contracts, it's going to push the blood up and out the pulmonary artery, which is a little struggle to get it there. Okay, so here we go, out the pulmonary artery, kind of stuck at the top, pulmonary artery. And from the pulmonary artery, remember this blood then gets pumped to the lungs, and in the lungs it gets oxygenated and drops off carbon dioxide and comes back through the pulmonary veins. And the pulmonary veins are that big spot on the back of the heart that I just showed you, okay? And they would flow into the left atrium here. So now we're up here, you see it kind of poking into that left atrium at the top there. That would fill, squeeze the blood down through the bicuspid valve, coming right towards you guys through that bicuspid valve. So remember, the parachute here is the actual valve. So it's coming through the valve, fill this whole ventricle, okay, and then squeeze right on up and out the aorta to all destinations of the body from there, right? So that's kind of our pathway of the blood going through the heart, all right? Nice little review on our diagram sheet. Okay, here's that superior vena cava into the right atrium, okay, through the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle, pulmonary valve, pulmonary artery, goes to the lungs to get oxygenated, comes on back through these pulmonary veins into the left atrium through that bicuspid valve, or also called the mitral valve, into the left ventricle, and pumped out to the whole body from there. So that from there it can go to every destination of the body. Okay? Last thing we wanted to quickly review is how the heart contracts. Okay, so remember it's called the cardiac conduction system. And the cardiac conduction system, let's go back to our actual heart here.